Hello, my name is Harzing and I'm a professor, research mentor and staff development lead at Middlesex University London. Welcome to this presentation on improving your research profile, reputation and impact. This presentation consists of 8 sections that can be watched as freestanding videos or as part of a long playlist. In this 6th session of the 8-part presentation, we will look at the various research profiles that are important in academia, and I will talk about why using social media in academia could be beneficial for you too. We will also talk about the downsides of social media. The earlier presentations in this series talked about research reputation, research impact, as well as various topics related to citation impact. If you're interested in these, make sure you catch up with them. This 6th session in the series is a key session in which we will discuss the various social media platforms, as well as the pros and cons of social media use in academia. As it might all be a little bit overwhelming, especially for novices, I will then provide you with a clear 7-step process that you can use to improve your reputation and impact in the next session. And I will finish off in the 8th session with some evidence showing that sharing on social media is effective, as well as some tips on what to do if you still don't know where to start. So now let's move on to social media for academics. In this session I will not have the time to look at all of the various social media profiles in great detail, but if you are at Middlesex University, we can go through some of the specifics in the flipped classroom sessions I will be running if you're interested in that. However, I've also written up a very extensive 8-part blog post series about this, covering the why of social media, an overview of the key options and their respective strengths, as well as 5 dedicated posts for Google Scholar profiles, LinkedIn, ResearchGate, Twitter and blogging. In a final post, I also explain how these 5 options can work together, both as a source for professional and academic information and as a way to share news about your research. Our ACI colleague, Krista, has also written a series of 6 excellent blog posts on my website on this topic, and I highly recommend you to check that out as well. So what are we talking about when we're talking about social media for academics? Well, that's a bit fluid, as there are literally dozens and dozens of different platforms. But broadly speaking, we have 5 categories of online platforms to communicate with others and to build your identity and reputation as an academic professional. Now, not all of them are strictly social media in that not all of them have an interactive element, but these are the ones that I think are most important for academics. First of all, research profiles, then LinkedIn, paper repositories, text-based sharing and visual sharing. I will discuss each of those in turn. Now, obviously, you don't have to use all of these platforms, certainly not intensively. If you did, you probably wouldn't have time to do the research you're hoping to publicize on these platforms in the first place. So, to reiterate my message in the very first part of this presentation, see this presentation as a menu of tools. There is no need to partake in every dish on the menu, just eat the ones that taste good to you. However, I do have some recommendations on platforms that might be particularly useful, and in the last part of this presentation I will provide you with some guidelines on how to make the most of social media engagement when you have very little time. That's the 8th part of this presentation. But first, let's look at each of these 5 categories in a bit more detail. Now, the first category of social media in academia are what we call research profiles. These are profiles that provide a list of your publications, sometimes with a short bio, and they're not strictly speaking social media, and they don't allow for actual engagement with others, but they do help you to build your online identity. So of those listed, I would suggest the first 3 are essential. Your Scopus and Web of Science ID are a bit less important as they have less public visibility, but if you do have some time to spare, I suggest you take a look at them and ensure that they are complete and error-free. I will discuss your staff profile and why you really need to invest an hour or so to make sure that it is comprehensive and up to date in the next slide. In addition, I would strongly encourage you to open a Google Scholar profile and create an ORCID profile. The first, the Google Scholar profile, basically gathers all of your publications and provides a list with the number of times they are cited. And as we've discussed in earlier sessions, Google Scholar includes books and chapters and reports and even non-traditional publications such as software or databases. So it presents a really complete picture of your research output. ORCID does something similar but without citations. The advantage of ORCID is that it provides you with a unique number, and this is especially important if you have a common name, as people might be confusing you with your namesakes. Moreover, many journals and universities are now requiring you to have an ORCID, and both profiles are really very easy to set up, take little time, and the process is very intuitive. For most academic, a Google Scholar profile will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and an ORCID profile not much more than that. So for information on Google Scholar profiles, see my post linked on this slide. Most academics at Middlesex University already have an ORCID profile, so I won't be discussing that. But if you don't and need guidance on that, you will find a guide in the Middlesex University repository. Now, can I please urge you to make your staff profile your number one priority as soon as possible after watching this presentation. This is true regardless of whether you're listening to this as a Middlesex staff member or a staff member at another university. Making sure your university staff profile is complete and up to date is essential. These profiles are the public image of the university, and at Middlesex University, as in many other universities, there are just too many profiles that are either empty or very sketchy or out of date. I know that most of these staff profile editing systems are not terribly easy to use, but it takes less than an hour to fully populate your profile, and only maybe 2 to 3 hours to create a stunning one. A link to the instructions is included on the system at Middlesex University. So first, enable the link to the Middlesex repository so that your publications show up automatically. That's one less thing to enter yourself, so make sure you do that. Second, consider adding some visual spice. Include not just your essential staff picture, but also some other pictures or a video. At Middlesex University, many of us created 1-minute videos of our research, so I have linked that video on my page. Third, be creative. Just be creative with the sections. Most universities will have fixed sections, but there's usually considerable flexibility in what you can put in there. So just include whatever makes your profile stand out. For instance, for me, although I have a very strong profile in publications and citations, I can't boast a particularly strong external engagement record with industry and government. So in the engagement and impact section, I focused on impact in terms of publication awards, fellowship, and my engagement with the academic community worldwide through editing, the Signa network, my website, my blog. So just pick what is relevant to you. Fourth, make sure that you include links to your other profiles. This means that you can keep your staff profile relatively stable and add new information on other social media accounts that are a bit more flexible in terms of their content and editing. And then finally, make your bio a bit more attractive than a boring list of qualifications and job titles. If people are really interested where you completed your degrees, they can go to LinkedIn. Your bio is an excellent signal, an excellent place to signal your research interest, but weaved into an attractive narrative, one that is accessible to academics and non-academics alike, indicating, for instance, you're available for PhD, supervision, express any desires for collaboration with industry or government, or anything else you'd like visitors to know about. Again, it really shouldn't take too much time. An hour should be plenty for a basic profile, and if you make it future-proof, you only need to update it maybe once a year or so. Now, the second main category has only one platform in it, LinkedIn. I'm giving this a category on its own because it's so versatile, and in the past years I've also seen academic use of the platform increase very rapidly. So it's a good place to be if you want to start using social media. And of course, LinkedIn is an online CV where you list your educational and employment history and maybe a short bio. And that's how most of us came to know it. However, did you know you can also list your academic papers on your profile and highlight any awards or other accomplishments? You can also use it to share news by using the LinkedIn sharing button to share news from any other platforms. Here are 2 blog posts on my own blog that I share through LinkedIn, but you can also share from any other site. You can also write directly about your own research by writing LinkedIn articles. Here is an article that I wrote directly in LinkedIn. It's not about my own research, but it's about my work at Middlesex University on creating a supportive and inclusive research culture. You can also help others by writing recommendations for them. I've recently written some 50 of them for my colleagues, my co-authors, my mentees, and other people I admire. Here are 4 of them. I've also shared these recommendations as posts on LinkedIn. So you can use LinkedIn as a networking tool by interacting with your LinkedIn contacts through the inbuilt messaging system. I've not included that as an example, as obviously messaging is private, but you can also leave messages and comment on other people's posts or react to their comments. Here you can see an exchange with one of my co-authors, Maria Bacida, in the activity panel, where you can also see how I shared someone else's post on equality, diversity and inclusion strategies and action plans, not being worth the paper they're written on if they're not followed by actual action. The only important thing that for academics that LinkedIn doesn't have are citations and the full text of your papers, and it's also a little bit cumbersome to add your papers, so I suggest you simply add the top 3 or the top 5 or the ones that you think are most representative. For more information on any of this, see my post on LinkedIn, which is linked at the bottom right corner of this slide. Now, the third element of social media in academia is paper repositories. The main function of these type of platforms is to provide access to full text versions of all of your papers. And there are 3 different types of paper repositories. First, there is your own university repository, which houses all of the papers and other research outputs published by staff members of that particular university. And these repositories will have profiles for individual academics, but they are primarily organization focused. So many universities have their own repository, Middlesex included. And in the UK, submitting your full text paper to your university repository within 3 months acceptance, not publication, is compulsory. Then there are general repositories, such as, for instance, SSRN, which contain a huge collection of papers by hundreds of thousands of academics. And these repositories are primarily paper focused, not institution focused. Although some of them have rudimentary profiles for authors, they are primarily a collection of papers. I don't really use these repositories myself because I post all of my online papers on my own website. But here is a paper that I published with some computer scientists who put it on a platform. By the way, the match between the Cornell and Middlesex College scheme is entirely coincidental. Finally, there are repositories that are more individually oriented, author oriented, such as a ResearchGate and academia.edu. Here, academics create their own profile and papers are listed under that profile. So author-based, not paper-based or institution-based. You can also create research projects in ResearchGate where you bundle papers and write up news flashes on current projects. They have rudimentary social media functions as you can follow other academics and submit questions. So for more information on this, see my post on ResearchGate, which I think is the most important of these. Now, the fourth element of social media and academia is sharing text-based material. There are two key ways of doing this, Twitter and blogging. Twitter is essentially micro-blogging, very short snippets of text, whereas blogging involves longer posts, usually between 500 and 1,000 words, but sometimes longer. Although they're mainly text-based, they can always include visuals for more impact. I've included here a few tweets that I sent about my own research, and each of them has an image included. The first one is the publisher image that is drawn in automatically if you include the DOI. The second one is the lead image in a blog post that my co-author wrote about the paper. And the third one is simply the cover page of the article. And then in terms of blogging, I have my own blog on which I publish about all things in academia, with a focus on helping early career researchers and demystifying many aspects of academia. However, I also blog about my own research occasionally. I've also published on external blogs like Middlesex Mind, the Middlesex University blog, and the LSE Impact blog. For more information about both these options, see my posts on Twitter and blogging that are linked on the bottom right hand corner. Now, in this presentation we talk mostly about using Twitter to share your own research, but you can also use it for public engagement. My law school colleague Joelle is providing simple explanations for complex legal issues through sticky notes, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. She's also co-director of an organization called the Good Lobby Profs, who mobilize academic expertise to counter major rule of law violations and abuse of power within and across Europe. Their Twitter account is a really important way of communicating about this organization. And last but not least, visual ways of sharing your research. This can include, first of all, SlideShare. If you've given a nice presentation that you think would be useful to a wider audience, you can create a SlideShare account and simply upload it. That way you can refer everyone to it, and it can also be, of course, found by non-academics. This will be quite a useful option for people doing a lot of presentations, but there isn't a huge social media element here. People can follow your SlideShare account, but that's about it. Even so, it could be quite useful to give broader exposure to your work, as it's not a lot of work to upload a presentation. I have about 20 presentations on there, and although most of them only get a few hundred views, my inaugural lecture at Middlesex University surprised me with about 4,000 views. Then Instagram and YouTube are a bit more interactive and good ways to share images and videos. I've created a YouTube account about a year and a half ago, and I found it really useful to share recorded presentations like this one I'm doing right now. I don't use Instagram, but some of my colleagues do. Here is Athena's account, and you can see how she posted about her own research on Instagram as well. Now, additional options are using infographics that summarize your research in just one glance, or animations such as research doodles. I haven't worked with either of these yet, but it is definitely something I would like to explore in the future. I also don't have a blog post yet on these visual options, but I am planning to write one up in the coming year or so, once I've explored all the options myself. And once this is ready, it will be linked on the collator page that I have created, and that's listed on this slide too. Now, why would you use social media at all? I would say there's at least 4 key reasons. First of all, to publicize your work and to generate impact, whether that's academic impact or wider societal impact. All the social media platforms that I have briefly discussed in the previous slides can help you with this. A Google Scholar profile and a good staff profile ensures people get a good overview of your work. Paper repositories such as ResearchGate can help you to ensure that the full text of your paper is available to everyone. Text-based social media platforms such as Twitter and blogging can be used to write up stories about your research, and visual-based platforms such as Instagram and YouTube and SlideShare can be used to visualize these stories. And finally, LinkedIn can be used in all of these ways. You can list your papers on your profile, write posts about your paper, and share visuals from your paper. The platforms that promote interactions, such as Twitter, LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and Instagram, are very useful to build your academic network and collaborations. Blogging and platforms like YouTube and SlideShare typically display less interaction, but they can still be useful in building your network. Twitter, LinkedIn and blogging are also very helpful to build public engagement by interacting with people outside academia. These platforms are used both by academics and non-academics, whereas research profiles and platforms such as ResearchGate have more of an academic audience. Now, you can also use all of these platforms simply to stay current in the field. And that's actually one of the uses of Twitter and LinkedIn that has most surprised me, because I get a lot of academic news through these platforms. So in sum, I would say that all of these platforms combined help you to build a professional identity and reputation. You can read much more about this in the two linked blog posts, but for all of these links, remember that if you have access to the slides, you can click on them to go to the relevant webpage. If you don't, just Google them and maybe add the name of my website, www.harzing.com, and it will be in the first search results. As I said, there are good reasons to use social media, but there are also good reasons not to use social media. Well, I'm not so sure there are really good reasons, but there's certainly reasons that academics have mentioned to me in the past. The first one is that academics often don't know what to do and how to do it. They're basically insecure about their skills, and I can fully understand that. But first of all, I do hope that the various sections of this presentation and the accompanying blog posts have given you some insight in this. And second, if you are a bit of a technophobe and are concerned about the mechanics of it, rest assured that all of these platforms make it very easy for you to start. The biggest idiots can and unfortunately often do use them. So surely as an academic, you are smart enough to figure out what to do. I also hear a lot of people say, well, I just don't have enough time. They might be using social media in a private context and have experienced how it can be a major time drain. And that's absolutely true. But I think it is possible to do this effectively and to just set aside some time once a week or maybe even once a month and focus on the essentials. In the last part of this presentation, I will give you some tips on how to get the best results if you are time poor. Other people say, I'm concerned that if I do this professionally, I'm blurring identities because I'm also sharing and repeating stuff that's more personal. And I think that's a very valid concern, but it basically means that you need to decide in advance what kind of identity you want to build up on a particular social media platform. If you have a LinkedIn or ResearchGate account, that will probably be mostly professional most of the time. Twitter lends itself for both professional and private news. So if you're really keen on Twitter and you'd like to share a lot of cat videos, using that as an example because it seems to be the most popular thing shared on social media, then maybe it's a good idea to have a separate private Twitter account and then to have a professional Twitter account. You can open as many accounts as you want with different handles and different usernames. Then of course there's the worry of online abuse and trolls. And in about 5 years of social media use, I haven't personally experienced any of this, but I do know others who have, and this is a very valid concern. There's some excellent guidance from the university on this that you will see linked. So if you are concerned about this but don't want to give up on social media, here are a few things you can do. You can first of all be selective about the platforms you engage on. If you are unlikely to get abuse on your staff profile or your Google Scholar profile or paper repositories, as they're not interactive. However, abuse is also quite uncommon on LinkedIn, Blogging, whether long form blogging or microblogging such as Twitter and YouTube, are a bit more likely to attract nasty people. However, you can simply not enable comments on blogs or limit the viewing of your tweets to the people that you connect with only. You can also be selective about what you post and decide not to engage in political debates, for instance. But if you do research on controversial topics, so as any form of identity, anything related to politics, migration, or in the current UK context, anything related to Brexit or COVID vaccination, you need to seriously think about whether you want to expose yourself to potential loonies. Now, other people say, well, actually I haven't published that much, I haven't done that much research, I'm a junior academic, I don't really have that much to say. Well, that doesn't really matter, because you can also be just there and listen to what other people share on LinkedIn and Twitter and on their blogs, and you can respond to that, and in that way engage and build a profile and possibly followers as well. Then once you've published and you've published your first paper, you know what kind of interaction goes on these fora. You know what language to use, you know what the academic etiquette around what you do and what you don't do on this particular social media platform. That's much better than waiting to publish your first paper, then open all sorts of accounts and then blunder into it or speaking into a void because you don't have any followers yet. Okay, then there's one more reason that I hear a lot, and that's important enough to devote a separate slide to. Now, the most frequent thing I hear from academics about not wanting to use social media is something like, it's just not me. They're not very articulate about why that is. It's just something they don't feel comfortable with. But when they say this, it's usually one of two things they will feel uncomfortable about. First, it's about publicizing their own work. They feel it's a bit vulgar to do that. But remember, publicizing your own work is not like continuous and targeted aggressive, like, look, this is what I've published today. Look, this is what I've published the next day. Look, I've got another citation. Look, I've got another mention. You can do that, obviously. And I know some people who do that. But they are the ones that I referred to in one of my latest blog posts on how to publicize your work without being obnoxious, and they fall squarely in the obnoxious category. People pretty soon stop following you or listening to you if you're one of these people, because I'm not interested in someone who only ever tells me that they've published a new paper or they have a new achievement. I'm interested in people who actually share useful information. So publicizing your work is simply seeking to ensure that those people who might be interested in knowing about it, know about it. It's not about the kind of boosting your own ego all the time and thumping your chest like, oh, look at how good I am. So the other one is about networking, and I don't know about you, and I don't know about your upbringing or your native language, but in Dutch, which is my native language, networking was always seen as something a bit dirty. If my father would be talking about networking, he would always be using it in the context of someone getting something done just through connections, not because they were any good or not because they had the right qualifications. And that's kind of the image I had of networking when I came into the academic world. And of course, again, there's a bit of that. Some people are not great academics, but they still manage to get what they want through networking. But networking can also be used in a positive way. It can simply be used to cultivate connections with others who share the same interests, and that's the way we're talking about when we talk about networking through social media. Now, if you still feel uncomfortable about promoting and publicizing yourself, why not do this for your colleagues and ask them to do that for you? As I mentioned earlier, I've recently started to write LinkedIn recommendations for my colleagues, my mentees, co-authors and other people I admire. I'm currently at about 50 and I'm hoping to write many more. I do share these on social media under the hashtag Positive Academia. And in addition to that, I reshare articles and contributions by myself and others that focus on this theme of positive academia. they don't promote me or Middlesex directly, but they do associate Middlesex with a positive research culture, which is something that I think is very important too. Two other colleagues have recently joined me in this initiative. Our new HR assistant, who's posting weekly about a Middlesex staff member at a time, and Krista, who is posting about her activities with students. We even have a messaging group on LinkedIn where we coordinate postings and help each other. So I think grassroots initiatives like this are very effective, and I do hope you will be joining us and start promoting your colleagues too. Now, I hope you enjoyed this part of the presentation, and if you didn't use social media in an academic context yet, you have a better idea of why it might be useful. If you were a hesitant user, you might by now have a better insight why this might be and what you can do about it. But this still might be a little bit overwhelming. So in the next section, I will provide you with a clear 7-step process that you can use to improve your reputation and impact. And in the last session, I will finish off with some evidence that sharing your research on social media is effective, and some tips about what you can do if you still don't know where to start. Now, if you're watching this presentation from outside Middlesex University, I wish you all the best in building your own research profile, reputation and impact. If you're watching this presentation in preparation for a flipped classroom session that I will be running at Middlesex University, I really look forward to seeing you in one of those sessions, but do make sure you come prepared with your questions.